Hmm? Good. Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a conversation with the Mutts. I'm Mr. Mutt.
And I'm Mrs. Mutt.
And tonight's conversation will revolve around the Oregon Trail, which surprisingly had quite a bit of information on it that I had never even heard of, being that, well, in my general area, we kind of glanced over it. And I think Mrs. Mutt pretty much had the same experience.
Yeah, we really, in Iowa and Wisconsin, we touched on it briefly, and that was it. There was really no in-depth discussion or study on it.
Yeah.
I definitely learned more doing it now than I did then.
I learned today, watching a video, that the phrase manifest destiny, which was what they supposedly had called it when the Oregon Trail started, was actually not the name. That was a name given to the whole expansion westward.
Idea.
The westward expansion.
Well, it wasn't just
by San Francisco reporters, what I'm trying to say.
Right, but Manifest Destiny, it's my understanding Manifest Destiny was not just for the westward expansion. That Manifest Destiny also foresaw us expanding to take over Canada and Mexico.
Well, we should have.
The whole
my opinion.
North American continent.
We should have, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
Well, if we had, we wouldn't be having as much problems as we are with immigration.
No. We won't get. We are not going to discuss immigration tonight.
No.
I'll let you open up since you have a lot of the factual stuff and I have a bit more of the oddity stuff.
Yes. Well, I saw some of the oddity stuff, so I may be able to help pitch in on some. But yeah, I do have more of I wrote big enough. I don't need my reading glasses to read my notes.
Mm-hmm.
The Oregon Trail, I know one of your things that you're going to talk about, we'll just bring that up now, is the fact that it did not have just one trail. It was several trails that ran along the same basic direction.
Hey, Alex, can you bring that down a little? Thanks, buddy.
But overall, it ran from Independence, Missouri to Oregon City, Oregon, near present-day Portland. One of the main routes in the 19th century was, hi, AD. It was one of the two main routes during the 19th century. The other was the Santa Fe Trail.
Yeah. And
each had branches to California. The Oregon Trail was about 2,000 miles and was used mostly in the 1840s to 1860s. Before it started being used, travelers would actually have to go by ship around the southern tip of South America, and that would take nearly a year.
Yeah. By the way, AD, don't go anywhere. We might need your help with the pronunciation of some of these names.
Yes.
I'm just giving you a heads up because some of them made no sense to us whatsoever. And we know we're going to mispronounce
some of the Indian names.
Native names.
Yeah,
native names.
Sorry, they called them Indian left and right in my research. And by the way, my research came up a lot from Britannica.com. Before the turn of the 19th century, there were few whites that ventured west of the Mississippi River. One that did was a French-Canadian trapper and explorer named Toussaint Charbonneau. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Toussaint Charbonneau?
He actually was married to a Shoshone woman whose name I'm sure you'll all recognize. Sacagawea. They were both actually instrumental to Lewis and Clark
I have a question. How much is a sack of Julia? And where can I pick up Julia by the sack at my local hardware store?
You can get it at Food Lion by the pound.
Food Lion, for those of you who don't know, is our local grocery store. We can get Julia by the sack.
No, you get a sack of it, but you have to pay for it by the pound.
I see. Okay. Yes, it's a bad joke, ladies and gentlemen.
He's full of them.
Yes. And I'm full of it.
Yes, you are. Sometimes it's surprising your eyes are not brown.
It's true. It's true. Anyway, let's get back to the...
In 1810, John Jacob Astor, you may remember him from the Titanic. He organized an expedition of frontiersmen to establish a trading post for his American Fur Company, and that's not just American Fur Company. That is the name of the fur company, American Fur Company.
Every time I hear John Jacob Astor, I want to drop the Astor off and go and finish.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith.
Yes, yes, I admit it.
I'm sorry. My mother watched Young and the Restless when I was young.
I'm sorry your mom watched it too.
So I hear John Jacob Astor, and I picture Victor from Young and the Restless because that's the actor that played him in Titanic.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
No clue.
I don't know the actor's name, but that's who I picture every time. They actually followed the Mississippi River upstream from St. Louis to Arikara Indian villages in what is now South Dakota, then westward through what is now Wyoming and Idaho to Oregon with a group they actually met up with a group that had sailed by ship, and with them they established Fort Astoria. Now and that was in 1812. Now Astoria, Oregon.
And by the way, AD, if you want to jump up in the chat so you can help us with some of this, you're more than welcome to. The link is pinned at the top.
This was the first American-owned settlement on the Pacific Ocean coast.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So Astor is the one that's responsible for the first American-owned Pacific Ocean coast settlement.
Okay, then. Did not know that.
No. Well, she says she's in chat. I guess she's going to stay there instead of coming up into the studio.
Okay.
Astor's expedition, however, was in need of supplies, so they sent members back east. Why did it just get dimmer over here?
Because I moved the light.
They were in need of supplies, so they sent members back east in 1812. During that journey, Robert Stewart and his companions found the South Pass in southwestern Wyoming. This was a 20-mile gap in the Rocky Mountains. Sorry.
Say hi.
Hello.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
I'm awesome.
Yes, you are.
So that offered the lowest and easiest, actually, crossing of the Continental Divide. I found an easier way.
I have a question for you, AD. Since you're in chat, since you're up here now, was this a big thing that you all discussed in school? Because
growing up out there,
we might have covered it for a week or two.
Oh, I don't even think that.
We discussed a lot of it because Fort Vancouver was actually one of the biggest fur posts. And it's
tree.
Downtown from where I live. And if you look up Dr. Whit, I think it's Whitmer. I'll have to Whitman, Dr. Whitman. He
Yes,
was
he was the physician that became the missionary.
yes. His house was built about 30 years ago in the fort. They replicated it about 30 years ago, and I have yet to go see it. So yeah, we talked a lot about, especially, well, because where I'm from, Oregon and Washington. Yeah, we talked a lot about the Oregon and Washington part, not, from the beginning. So
Right. Well, I was
Right.
just curious.
I'm wondering if parts of Missouri discuss it more, being that it started in Missouri.
Well, I also wondered about it because she was the one that brought it to our
Right.
attention.
If she studied it more because of
Right.
the history being right there. And
Right.
That was
so
a theory.
that was the question I had. That's why I was curious. I would have never have thought to have even discussed the Oregon Trail if it hadn't been for AD. Just because we've got so much of it right here. We got so much history right here,
Right.
Of our own local history.
That's what you pretty much discussed the most in school, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you knew who Lord Dunmore was. You knew who Cornwallis was.
See, we stuck to the textbooks.
We knew who Robert E. Lee was because he was from Richmond. Actually, he was from Arlington. What is now the Arlington National Cemetery was his plantation.
Donated that, correct?
Not originally, no.
No.
It was originally stolen for tax money that they refused to take from his son because they wanted it to come from him. In other words, they wanted him to come in from the war to deliver his own taxes so they could then take him prisoner of war. And he refused to do that. He sent his son and they refused the taxes, thereby losing. That's how they lost the farm. They ended up suing the federal government and getting the farm back. But then they turned right around and redonated it back several years later, because there were already so many graves on it. Yeah. So that was kind of the gist of it all. But now I know that AD had an interest in this. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we went with it. I have found some very interesting odd facts, which we will discuss after you're done with your section of facts.
Well, I found it interesting that, Astor's expedition founded the first American-owned establishment. Well, it actually foundered. When the British took the post over in 1813 during
Foundered or floundered?
Foundered.
Okay.
Not floundered. It wasn't a fish.
No worries, Steel Tree. No worries.
It wasn't a fish.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand.
It wasn't in The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
The British actually took the post over in 1813 during the War of 1812. He sold out to the Northwest Company, which was a rival of the Hudson Bay Company,
right,
the dominant fur trader in the Northwest in Canada.
Correct. That much I didn't know.
Now, as we were talking about with Dr. Whitman a minute ago, this will tie in. The first missionary group left in 1834 from independence. That missionary group had the first white women to cross the South Pass and the Continental Divide. These were Narcissa Whitman and Eliza Spalding. These were the wives of Dr. Where's his first name? It's Marcus Whitman and Henry Harmon Spalding.
Every time you mention Dr. Whitman, I have to wonder if this is not the same Dr. Whitman that later was the namesake for the Whitman candy
Chocolate
company.
candy.
Yeah,
Chocolate company.
yeah.
I didn't think so, but I could be wrong. Yeah, Dr. Whitman was a physician who became a congregational missionary. Now, he actually, and this is where AD is going to come in handy.
Get ready to pronounce some of this, AD.
Let's see.
First word.
In the mid 1830s, they established, both of them established missions in Oregon County, Oregon country. Whitman established among the, is spelled Cayuse, I think. I think that maybe ASE.
Cayusa?
Cayusa?
Cayusa? Is that it?
Cayuse?
Spell it again, slower.
CAY, and that's either a U or an A. I may have had something on the page. SE.
Chaosy?
Higasi? Okay. And you're gonna love this one. It's an area somewhere near Walla Walla.
Yep,
You
that's
ready?
Washington.
What?
That's
Yeah,
Washington.
it's Washington, but you're gonna love this word that I'm about to spell for you. W-A-I, another I, L-A-T-P-U.
Spell that again.
I
I was looking for my paper. So W-A.
W-A-I, L as in Larry, A, T as in Tom, P as in Peter, U.
Oh, I've never been able to pronounce this right. Walloptu. Wallopu.
Wallopum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait
And
till you
again,
get to Puyallup.
Huh? Do what?
Wait until you get to the word Puyallup.
You get to the word Puyallup? I don't think
I
I did.
haven't. No.
Oh, we have some.
All I know is
we have some great names here.
Yeah, you do. I got to admit. Yeah, you
There-
do. Walla Walla is one of them.
Well, the
All I
Walla
know
Walla
is
onion, the
near
Walla Walla
present
sweet
Walla
onion
Walla.
comes from Washington State.
Now, Spalding established among the Nez Perez in Lepwai.
Let's purse.
No. That word, not that.
Okay.
Lepwai.
Okay.
Near what is now Lewiston, Idaho. The first group to travel the entirety, what we now know as the Oregon Trail, was the Wyeth Lee Party. They were the first missionaries to leave independence. Led by Jasper Lee, they joined a party headed by New England merchant named Nathaniel Wyeth along the way, and they made their way. Going back to Dr. Whitman.
Hey, hold on one second. You pronounced that last one that you asked, Wailatpu.
Wailapu?
Yeah,
Wailatpu?
yeah.
Okay. It looks much worse than it is.
Yeah.
Wailapu.
Okay.
Almost sounds Hawaiian. Or
Yeah, it does. It
almost sounds
almost
Polynesian.
Polynesian.
Yeah.
going back to Dr. Whitman, he had actually returned east and made the journey again with a remarkable caravan of nearly 1,000 settlers that Oregon history calls, calls the, quote, Great Migration.
Great migration.
Whitman's mission established a, I need that word again.
What?
What?
Wallawapu?
Malawapu?
Is that correct? Wallawapu?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wailatpu.
Wailapu.
Yeah.
It became an important stopping point for the immigrants to Oregon. But in 1847, Whitman, his family, and several other whites were massacred by natives following an epidemic of measles. This helped spur the passing of a law establishing the Oregon Territory and contributed to the Cayuth War between the natives and the settlers, which didn't end until 1850. While on the trail, like I said, we know they didn't stick to the same trail.
No.
But they generally followed 3 rivers for water: the Platte and its tributary, the North Platte, the Snake, and the Columbia.
The Snake River, which Elvis almost made his complete jump.
There were several things that were found along the trail to augment what they had brought with them as far as diet. So buffalo were in such abundance that it was easy for even a novice to kill one.
Back then,
So anybody could grab a gun and shoot a buffalo.
You could eat for weeks.
Yep. However, much more fleet and needing to be a marksman to bring it down, you had the antelope. You also had jackrabbits, deer, bighorn or mountain sheep, ducks, sage hens, and grouse. The fish were also abundant in most of the rivers and streams. As far as cooking it, when they got to the treeless prairies, you could also often find something called buffalo chips. Yeah, you know what those are.
Hey, AD, can you get those by the pound?
Buffalo chips?
Yeah.
Pretty
And
sure.
do they taste like? And do they taste like buffalo?
We probably could get them to do like for flower beds or gardens, but it's not like we would eat them.
You would, but we're not talking like this is not like a potato chip.
No.
No.
Is this something like a cow pie?
Yes. These are actually flattened.
And for those of you who think I don't know, I already knew.
Yes.
I was joking.
These are basically flattened piles of buffalo poopy.
Buffalo poo.
But they would burn with little odor and make a hot fire.
Yep.
So,
I mean,
but
you got to figure the buffalo was pretty much, they're vegetarian. So I mean, you're talking, that's a lot of like grasses and that kind of thing. So what was that over there, Faceless Roommate?
Was that your reasoning why they didn't smell, or what?
No, that was my reasoning for why they burned hot.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
In addition, you could probably find some canned goods because the the travelers, as they went, would throw
discard.
stuff away
Oh,
as they went and get
I
to lighten their
cover.
load.
I cover some of that in my
the
at
trail
Fort
was
Sacrifice.
oftentimes littered with all sorts of things.
At Fort Sacrifice, I cover some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not just at Fort Sacrifice.
No,
it's
I'm
down
just
the
saying that
trail.
that's one of the things that I
Right.
do cover.
Most parties left in late April or May, and there was very good reason for this.
The snow to the mountain passes.
It's not just that. This is also so the animals would have grass to eat.
Yep.
And so they would be able to forage for food as they began their trip, but would still be able to cross the Blue and Cascade Mountain ranges before the heavy snows in the fall. Even leaving in as late as June could be disastrous. Travelers would have to contend with violent prairie thunderstorms with drenching rains, many times accompanied by hail and high winds. Let's not forget tornadoes in some places. And these could often easily damage tents or wagons. Then there were delays of days that were typical because of the flooding. The rivers and the streams would swell, making the passage just that much worse. The provisions that were recommended that you pack: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, tea, baking soda,
Makes sense.
bacon, dried beans and fruit, cornmeal, and rice.
Lots of it.
Hmm?
And lots of it.
Yes. They would typically carry in the wagons. The wagons were supposed to, I believe I read, carry about 2,000 pounds. They would typically carry about 1,800 in food.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
So that left you 200 for clothing,
Ammunition.
Cookingware, tools. Because what happens if your wheel breaks or your axle breaks on your you have to fix
Your
it.
prairie schooner, because they did not use the Conestogas.
No, they did not.
The Conestogas were not designed for that kind of travel.
Milk cows were often brought on the track, and each family typically carried a jug of water or a keg of water and a Dutch oven.
Yep, sounds about right.
So I wonder how heavy that keg of water would be.
A keg of water. You're probably talking. You just probably added another 100 pounds. So you're
That's per person. A person carrying that plus a Dutch oven.
Yeah. Not a person literally carrying it. They don't mean literally carrying it on them.
Yes.
No, they don't literally mean that.
That's what it said on Britannica.
Really?
Yes. Each person carried a water keg and a Dutch oven on them while they, and these people did not ride in these wagons. They walked alongside because there often wasn't room to ride in the wagons. And these wagons had no suspension. These things were not comfortable to ride in.
Oh God, no! I would imagine not. They didn't have shocks back then. I can't imagine carrying a keg though.
Okay, AD gave us a 1,298.27 pounds per keg
of water. There's no way that somebody's going to carry 130 pounds.
That can't be.
It was 100. It was 129.27. My finger slipped and hit two numbers.
Okay, so almost 130 pounds.
We're going to round. I'm rounding off to 130 pounds.
Right.
There's no way that an individual person.
So I'm thinking that's not the same size of the keg. It's just a keg. And it may have varied
Yeah.
depending on the person.
And I'm thinking they meant it carrying it on the wagon, not physically carrying it themselves.
I'm thinking they meant carrying it on themselves.
Right. Well, I can't imagine carrying that kind of weight.
We were talking about the wagon. Most often when you're watching movies, they show the Conestoga,
Right.
which looks like it bows a little bit and it's higher on the ends. This one, if you're old enough to remember the show.
She's about to date herself, ladies and
I am.
gentlemen.
Yes, I am.
Please note she's about to date herself.
Think Little House on the Prairie.
Knew that's where she's going.
If you remember the opening where Ma and Pa are at the top of the hill in their wagon, that is more like the Prairie Schooner. The Conestoga was used for some trails, but not this kind of trail. It was used as a cargo for some trails, but not this kind of trail. They were big, heavy, and unwieldy. Like I said, the travelers using the Oregon Trail used the Prairie Schooners. Some of those travelers used horses. However, most either used mules or oxen. They were better suited for the journey, and they were less attracted to the natives. They were less likely to be stolen.
Yeah.
They also had greater endurance. Now, as far as the mortality rate, I don't know if you came across this.
I didn't.
No?
Not really. Not the overall numbers.
Estimates range from 4 to 6% up to 10%. The greatest threats were accidents and disease. And the diseases were things like cholera, which was the most deaths. Diphtheria, which was the single biggest killer of children. This one's not exactly a disease, but poor nutrition was a cause of death. Typhoid, dysentery, mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria. Again, I don't know that this one's a disease, but food poisoning.
That's a disease.
Yeah, scurvy, measles, mumps, smallpox. And again, this isn't a disease, but they lumped it in. Women were always at risk while giving birth.
Yeah.
The natives were actually, especially at the beginning of the migration, the natives were not angry.
No, not at the beginning.
No. They got angry toward the end because we were killing off the buffalo.
In large numbers.
Yes, in large numbers. And we were being wasteful about it.
Yeah, that was the big problem.
And they couldn't swoop in and recover what was being wasted.
Right.
So, but at the beginning, especially, they looked forward to us coming through because it was a major source of trade.
Yeah.
And actually, fewer than 400 immigrants were killed in this sort of island throughout the entire time of the use of between 1840 and 1860. There we go. And they actually said that there was only something like 300 and some natives killed. Most natives were helpful and friendly and enjoyed trading with the settlers. The Oregon Trail was in use for the longest period of all the other all the overland routes, in part due to the fact that the railroad didn't reach Oregon until early 1880s. After railroads replaced much wagon train travel, the trail was used for eastward cattle and sheep drives.
Hmm.
So after the Great Migration West, it was used to drive cattle back to the and sheep back to the east.
Got you. And that's pretty much the historical factor.
Yeah, that's what I came up with.
Yeah. I came up with some similar things, like the Oregon Trail didn't follow a single route, which I'm not going to go back over that again. Pair of,
Although you did want to bring up the fact that you can still see the tracks.
well, that comes down later.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's jumping ahead.
I thought it was with that.
No. A pair of Protestant missionaries made one of the first trails crossing the frontier. And hold on a minute. Frontier explorers for fur trappers. I'll learn to talk next week, folks. First day, new mouth. Blazed a rough outline of the Oregon Trail in the early 19th century, but the route was initially considered too demanding for women and children or covered wagons to navigate. That changed in 1836 when newlywed missionaries Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, there we go.
Yep, Dr. Whitman. And
Dr.
his wife
Whitman took a small party of wagons from St. Louis to Walla Walla, Washington, to Walla Walla Valley.
to minister to the Cayuse Indians.
Yep. The 28-year-old Narcissa became the first white woman to traverse the Rocky Mountains, and her colorful letters home were later published in Eastern newspapers.
Wow.
Convincing many would-be pioneers that it was possible for their families to survive the journey west. Still, it wasn't until 1843 that the pioneer dam finally burst. 1,000 settlers along the Oregon Trail in an exodus now known as the Great Migration. Traffic soon skyrocketed, and by the late 1840s and early 1850s, upwards of 50,000 people were using the trail each year. Another one, like we've already established, the iconic Conestoga wagon was rarely used on the Oregon Trail. Popular depictions of the Oregon Trail often include trains of boat-shaped Conestoga wagons bouncing along the prairies. But while the Conestoga was an indispensable part of trade and travel in the East, it was far too large and unwieldy to survive the rugged terrain of the frontier. Most pioneers instead tackled the trail in more diminutive wagons that became known as prairie schooners, for the way their caravans covered
their canvas covers.
Canvas covers resembled a ship's sail.
I think they're even made out of the same material, the same kind of canvas.
I'm going to skip down here to number 4. The trail was littered, and you were talking about some of this, with discarded supplies. As traffic on the Oregon Trail increased, a bustling industry of frontier trade posts sprung up to supply food and equipment for the 5-month haul.
I had forgotten it takes took
It
5 months
took
to make
5
that,
months, yeah.
that journey.
In popular jumping off points like Independence, Missouri, unscrupulous merchants made a killing by conning frightened pioneer families into buying more provisions than they actually needed. The overload meant that many sections of the trail became junk heaps filled with discarded food barrels and wagon parts, broken down prairie schooners, and dead draft animals also littered the roads. And it wasn't unusual to see personal items like books, clothing, and even furniture on the trail. Fort Laramie in Wyoming eventually became known as Camp Sacrifice. I will be discussing Camp Sacrifice in just a few minutes, for its reputation as an Oregon Trail dumping ground. During the gold rush of the 1840s, pioneers reportedly abandoned a whopping 20,000 pounds of bacon outside its walls. 20,000 pounds of bacon.
That might last us a year.
Oh my Lord. That's bacon abuse, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how you all feel about bacon,
burgers, breakfast.
Yeah.
Bacon pancakes, bacon with French toast.
As Mrs. Mutt discussed earlier, Indian attacks were relatively rare on the Oregon Trail, contrary to depictions of in dime novels and Hollywood westerns. Attacks by Plains Indians were not the greatest hazard faced by the westbound settlers. While pioneer trains did circle their wagons at night, it was mostly to keep the draft animals from wandering off, not protection against an ambush. Indians were most likely to be allies and trading partners than adversaries, and many early wagon trains made use of Pawnee and Shoshone trail guides. Hostile encounters increased in the years after the beginning of the Civil War, but statistics show only around 400 settlers were killed by natives between 1840 and 1860. The more pressing threats were cholera and other diseases, which were made responsible for the vast majority of the estimated 20,000 deaths that occurred along the Oregon Trail.
I wanted to point out one more thing.
What's
when
that?
they got to places like the Columbia River with their wagons, they oftentimes rented rafts from the natives.
Yep.
And the natives helped them cross the river on their rafts.
Yep. Now, here's something that a lot of folks didn't realize. Did you know that graffiti was started pretty much on the Oregon Trail? Pioneers left behind graffiti and register rock along the trail.
Well, I'm sure graffiti was started before then. I mean, look at Egyptian hieroglyphics.
That's true. But, I'm talking about in America. Along with painting messages and mottos on their wagons, wagon canvases. Pioneers also developed a tradition of carving their names, hometowns, and dates of passage on some of the stone landmarks they encountered during their journey west. One of the most notable prairie guest books was Independence Rock, a 128-foot tall granite outcropping in Wyoming, dubbed the Register of the Desert. Thousands of travelers left their mark on the rock while camping along the nearby Sweetwater River. Sorry, I'm having some issues tonight with the vision. I apologize. Those in a hurry sometimes even paid stonecutters a few dollars to carve their messages for them. In addition to Independence Rock, pioneers also left behind signatures on Register Cliff and Names Hill, two other sites in Wyoming.
Yes, please forgive me for trying to help him. I know he's just having some issues with his vision.
Yeah, the chemo has affected my eyesight to a degree, and it's a temporary thing. I'm not even going to go try to get a new pair of glasses until after I'm done with the chemo.
I'm not trying to override him.
No,
so.
not at all. I don't think that is that way at all. She was just trying to help me out, folks. And another fact that I found was most Oregon Trail pioneers didn't settle in Oregon. Only around 80,000 of the estimated 400,000 Oregon Trail immigrants actually ended their journey in Oregon's Willamette Valley on the
of the rest.
Thank you. Of the rest, a vast majority splintered off from the main route to either Wyoming or Idaho and took separate trails leading to California and Utah.
Okay, wait. It's pronounced Willamette.
Willamette?
Willamette.
I'm sorry.
I thought we missed the I.
Yeah, Willamette.
Willamette.
Sorry about that.
That's good.
The California Trail eventually traveled by. Wait a minute. The California Trail was eventually traveled by
some.
I see what I wonder where that salt went. Okay, some 250,000 settlers, most of them prospectors seeking to strike it rich in the gold fields. The Utah route, meanwhile, sheltered
roughly 70,000 pilgrims to the land surrounding Salt Lake City.
Number 8 is the one that I wanted to. This is the one I was looking forward to sharing with you all. One of the trail's most famous pioneers made the crossing by wagon, by train, and by automobile and airplane. One trip on the Oregon Trail was more than enough for most pioneers. But Ohio native Ezra Meeker eventually made the trek a half a dozen times using nearly every available means of conveyance. The unusual odyssey began in 1906 when the 76-year-old jumped behind. Now, mind you, 76.
Wow.
Yeah.
In 1906, he was 76.
Yeah. Jumped behind the reins of a covered wagon and retraced the steps of his original pioneer journey from 54 years before.
So he had already made the journey once
Right.
and made it again in a wagon.
Yep. Meeker was concerned that the legacy of the Oregon Trail was being forgotten. So he made frequent stops to give lectures on its history and install homemade Meeker markers at pioneer landmarks. The trip made him a national celebrity. Crowds gathered to mark his arrival in major cities, and he eventually piloted his wagon all the way to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with President Theodore Roosevelt. Meeker went on to journey the Oregon Trail several more times by wagon, by train, and by automobile. His final crossing came at the age of 94 when he made the trip in an airplane.
In a biplane.
In a biplane, yeah. Flown by famed pilot Oakley Kelly, who was a famed stunt pilot, I also believe. I had to double check that. So yeah, that one that was of all of these, that was the one that I really thought was really kind of cool. Yeah.
If any of you remember the old game,
She keeps talking about this game. Does anybody know this game she's talking about? I don't. I never know.
AD, do you remember the game, or at least remember hearing about it? I never played it, but I remember seeing it at school.
What's the name of it?
Or the Oregon Trail.
No.
You don't remember seeing it at school?
No.
I may be dating myself again, but they re-released it.
I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of it either. Huh.
Yeah, they re-released it. It was when you saw the leaderboard before you got the chance to change any of it. They had names in there. Those were actually people who had been on the trail, and one of them, I believe, was that same Meeker. I know Meeker was one. There was a Meeker on that list.
It probably was him.
So I believe it was him. In theory,
Probably was him. What are some of the scary facts about the Oregon Trail? Now, this is from grunge.com, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that I got this portion of it. Actually, a lot of this came from grunge. What are some of the scary facts about the Oregon Trail? Swollen rivers could tip over and drown both people and oxen. Such accidents could cause the loss of life and most or all of the valuable supplies. Animals could panic when wading through deep water, causing the wagon to overturn. Animals could cause very serious injuries to their owners. So there's some of the scary things that could happen just simply trying to cross a river.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more sad facts about the Oregon Trail. The Utter Van Ornum Massacre. I'm going to have to blow this up a little, I think. In truth, there wasn't much conflict between the Native American tribes and early travelers, who were mostly fur traders and missionaries. But once settlers started heading west and claiming land for themselves all willy-nilly, not everyone was pleased. You'd be pretty mad too, I'm sure. The ill-fated Utter Van Ornum wagon train
would go down.
in history with the dubious honor of being the deadliest wagon train, and this is via the Idaho chapter of Oregon California Trail Association, led by Elisha Utter.
Sometimes written Otter.
Yeah, sometimes written Otter. The group included 4 families, 21 children, and a few former soldiers. They were attacked on September 9th, 1860, and 11 died in the 2-day confrontation. The tale told by the Washington State Historical Society suggested they may have been the fortunate ones, because when the 4 soldiers took the first opportunity, they had to pick the best horses and hightail their way out of Dodge. They left the party with a broken defense. Colonel George Wright, who was in charge of the military presence and rescue mission, said they likely would have survived if it wasn't for the cowards. The group scattered, and one of the soldiers made his way to a military camp outside of, is it
Fort Dales?
Yeah, Fort Dales. To sound the alarm. The rescue parties stumbled across some stragglers, but the most horrific scene was discovered by a Lieutenant Anderson. He found a camp of 15 people, including 5 dead, who had been partially
eaten by the starving living.
Yeah, by the starving living, who had accounted.
Once everyone had been accounted for, they found only 15 people had survived.
That's crazy.
AD, is it Dales? Is that Dalles?
Dowls.
Read this next one for me.
The Sager orphans?
Yep, the Sager orphans.
Okay. Ever feel like you have the worst luck on the planet? You don't have anything on the 7 Sager orphans. According to the National Park Service, 6 children set off from Missouri with their parents in early 1844. With the 7th being born in the wagon, patriarch Henry Sager took ill by the time they reached the Rockies, and they buried him alongside Green River. Naomi Sager descended into a sort of grief-stricken illness, and her daughter Catherine wrote, she was at times perfectly insane. She died near Twin Falls, Idaho, and the children, ranging from 13 years old to a newborn, were orphans for the first time. They traveled on with the wagon train and ended up in the care of missionaries Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. Well, there they are again.
There are the Whitmans again.
They'd established a safe home in the Walla Walla Valley, and within the year, the 7 had been officially adopted by the couple, who were killed in a massacre 3 years later, along with John and Francisco Sager, the eldest children. The others were taken captive, but only 4 were ransomed back. The other fell ill and died. Seriously, you don't have it that bad. And there's one consolation. And if there's one consolation, it's that surviving girls' memoirs will talk about the kindness they experienced along the way.
Okay, and here's the camp sacrifice. I'm going to ask you to also read that. Literally everything's blurring up on me right now.
Here, let me.
I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, but
Camp sacrifice. Emigrants only had what they had to carry. Imagine taking your entire family across the country with only what you can pack into a minivan and no rest stops or Taco Bells along the way. Food was a huge concern, and that makes Fort Laramie, nicknamed Camp Sacrifice, that much more tragic. Excuse me. According to the planes across, Fort Laramie became a major trading post. Settlers would keep as much as they could on their overloaded wagons in hopes of trading once they reached the fort. But that wasn't always possible. Everyone was in the same boat, so to speak, and traders didn't have much use for the more impractical items they brought along. Accounts tell of the dumping grounds outside the fort filled with treasured possessions like bookcases and furniture, iron safes, and books. Practical things were left too by people needing to spare their oxen from dragging the heavy loads. Anvils, weapons, plows, kegs, and barrels, all dumped. Also dumped extra foods. Oh, hold on. I accidentally made the thing jump. Extra foodstuffs. And one account even talked about the 20,000 odd pounds of bacon left behind. Given the starvation that happened later, it's impossible not to wonder how many people died dreaming of everything they dumped.
Right? The Donner, was it the Donner,
Party's undelivered letters. You're probably familiar with the story of the Donner Party, the second most famous thing about the Oregon Trail. They were heading for California, not Oregon, via online Nevada.
Via Nevada.
It said via online Nevada.
Yeah, that might have been something that.
When they set off in 1846, and about half met their grisly end in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Whether it's better to eat or be eaten is a discussion for another time, but the tragic footnote is that the entire thing could have been avoided. The Hastings cutoff was a fairly untried shortcut, and Fort Bridger sat at the trailhead. There was actually someone riding ahead of the Donner Party acting as a scout, and Edwin Bryant sent a letter back warning them it was too dangerous to take the so-called shortcut. The letter ended up in the hands of Fort Bridger's owners, and the people who stood to gain the most if thousands of settlers started passing through their trading post. So you can probably guess what happened next. Jim Bridger and partner Louis Vasquez certainly could have handed over the note, sending the Donner Party down the safer route and presumably preventing all the cannibalism nonsense. Instead, they never gave them the warning, sending them to some of the darkest days imaginable, all in the name of making a buck.
Mm-hmm.
Murder or survival?
That is the next thing, yep.
Surviving the Oregon Trail was just the beginning for some people. Just ask Louis Keseberg?
Keseberg, yeah.
He was a member of the Donner
Party.
And according to Sierra College, she paid horribly for his survival. Rumors started circulating that he was the first to dig into the not-so-scrumptious meal consisting of his fellow settlers, that he killed others for their meat, and that he preferred human meat to beef.
Mm-hmm.
The accusations got so bad, he even sued for slander and won $1. But when Keseberg died in 1895, even his obituary reminded everyone he was a cannibal. He was interviewed a few times, and when he was 62, he issued his first formal statement. Time was supposed to heal all wounds, he wrote. But that was BS when it came to something like this. Keseberg had sent his wife and a child on ahead and said, "For their sakes, I must live. I cannot describe the unutterable repugnance with which I tasted the first mouthful of flesh. This food was never otherwise than loathsome, insipid, and disgusting." He spent 2 months in the cabin, surrounded by the bodies of his dead friends, with wolves scratching to get to the meat inside. Tamsin Donner left her dead husband and joined him only a short time before she died too. He swore he only ate and never killed, writing, "A man, before he judges me, should be placed in a similar situation.
Poor bastard.
Then there are the Mormon handcart tragedies. Hindsight is 2020, so let's see if you can guess what went wrong with Brigham Young's plan to bring Mormon converts to their new paradise on earth.
Brigham Young.
The Denver Post reports the plan was simple. British and Scandinavian converts who were too poor to buy wagons would load all their worldly possessions onto a handcart, push them across the U.S., and make the journey in only 60 days. Sounds great, right? You'd totally sign up for that until you hear the list of problems. There were no supply stations. Carts broke down better than they rolled. Salt Lake City officials had no idea who was coming, and travelers weren't prepared for doing the work of hunters, pioneers, and oxen all at the same time. Between 1856 and 1860, 10 handcart companies traveled the trail, and two, the Martin and Willie companies, suffered heartbreaking tragedies. There were 1,100 people on those in those two companies alone, and they didn't set out until August. Again, hindsight. They were buried under feet of snow. Hundreds died, and those who survived lost arms and legs to frostbite. That's horrible, but there's a fascinating footnote that comes out of all this. Two survivors were 10-year-old Anne Campbell Giles and 12-year-old Maximilian Parker. They lived, met, married, and had a son you probably know of, Butch Cassidy. No wonder he was so badass. Just look at what his parents went through. And that seems to be the end of your notes.
The end of my notes. Yeah, that was the last thing that I brought up.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. No wonder he was so tough.
Look what his parents went
Yeah.
through. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know if you had covered any of that in your school notes.
I hope we taught you something, AD.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's interesting because we have a huge community of Mormons here where I live, and we never learned anything about Brigham Young.
Yeah, Brigham Young was. Yeah, he was one of the ones who brought the part. I knew that he had a large part in bringing over the Mormons into Salt Lake City. So that didn't surprise me any. The thing about Butch Cassidy kind of surprised me some, to be honest. I didn't realize that he was the offspring of survivors from the Brigham Young train, as it were.
The handcart
massacres, basically, as it was deemed. So those were some of the interesting facts that I found. We hope that you all have enjoyed.
I hope my stuff wasn't too dry.
Well, no, it was factual, and that's what Yeah. That's the important part is that it was factual and not.
Yeah, well, this wasn't a subject that was bright and bubbly. I mean, it's an important topic, but it wasn't a bright and bubbly.
No, it was definitely dark. It definitely took a darker turn than I thought it would take. Thanks for that, AD.
Sorry. and just for your information, we don't have buffalo here.
You don't have buffalo in Washington?
I mean, there might be a few farms that have
I know they're more prairie. I'm teasing her.
Yeah, buffalo isn't one of those huge commodities here in Washington.
Well, we can get buffalo here in North Carolina. We get it from the Lumbee Indians here, and down in North Carolina they ship it up this way.
Well, I mean, we get buffalo shipped, but I mean, we don't have a live buffalo.
Oh! We got some of it here at the zoo in Norfolk, but
that's
not many.
What we have here too. I mean, we have some farmers that might have some buffalo in with their cows, but,
Yeah, we need to make a day of it and go to the zoo at some point. Yeah, and kind of hang out. But next week's show is going to be interesting. We're going to do American roadside attractions.
Unusual roadside attractions.
I'm predicting that a lot of it's going to be on the old Route 66.
Well, actually, what I was thinking is the roadside attractions next week.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be on Route 66. They can be anywhere.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
And then
we
I
know
was
that there were a
thinking
lot on
after
it.
that, do a Route 66, one specifically about Route 66, a show just on Route 66.
Oh, we could. I mean, I know that my former channel partner on the other channel,
Mm-hmm.
and I did a Route 66 show.
Well, it's up to you if you want to do another one or not.
You know, we'll talk about it. You and I can talk about it. We're definitely going to do the unusual roadside attractions next week. I know that the world's largest rocking chair is no longer what was deemed the world's largest rocking chair.
There's a new one.
There is a new one, and the old one rocker weighed half. What was it? What did I tell you it was?
2000.
It was like, yeah, it was like, each rocker weighed 1,000 pounds. That's what it was. They were half a ton apiece.
You're talking the actual
The rocker itself, yeah.
the rocker
The rocker at the bottom of the chair, yeah.
Mm.
Each one of them weighed 1,000 pounds.
Okay.
So that's a half a ton. I do remember seeing that in a video when we did the Route 66 thing. But yeah, we'll talk about doing the Route 66 after we do the unusual American roadside attractions. Well, folks, I don't know what you all have planned for the week. I am going for chemo tomorrow. Joy, thrills, adulations.
You can do it, honey.
So I will keep you all appraised. I should get the results of my CAT scan from earlier or last week tomorrow when I go. It actually was the day after the day I was supposed to have chemo last week. But I will keep you all abreast of everything. And Guardsman, Blaine. Wow, Blaine. He's late, but I'm glad to see him.
Yes. Or he's been here lurking all this time and just now said something.
No, that's possible. Yeah, that's possible. And that's okay if he has been lurking. I don't,
And
I love my lurkers.
Angel may be in here, and for whatever reason, we can't see her.
Yeah, I mean, we've done everything we can do on our end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. That's just really kind of odd to me that we're not able to see her because she's like literally the only one. I know that AD had problems in the past.
It's okay, Blaine. We'll forgive you this time. Just don't make it a habit.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. We'll only beat you with a wet noodle. That way it's good and floppy. I can get it to snap. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. But yeah. Do you have anything to say before we close this out for the night?
Thank you all for joining us. And again, I hope my stuff wasn't too dry. His stuff was a little more interesting, I think.
Yep. You as well, AD. Have a great night. And like I said,
didn't you tell her to stick you around?
No.
Okay.
I just asked her to come up so she could help us pronounce some of this stuff. So no. Supersonic noodles. Yes, exactly. Supersonic noodles. There's a rap in there somewhere. I bet I could work that out and make that happen. But anyway, we will be back next week at our regular time, provided I'm feeling 100%. I do appreciate everyone being patient with us while I'm going through this. Sometimes it just wears me out so bad that I just can't.
This is true, AD. Did you call if you need?
For whatever reason. Okay, we'll do. But I do want to say thank you all for the continued support.
Yes, and the continued prayers.
Absolutely. Tomorrow, provided I get to do number 9.
You will officially be three
quarters of the way. Yep, I'll be 3/4 of the way through. So, and then, of course, when number 12 hits, and
You'll
I
be able
get
to
to ring
ring
that
that
bell, and I'm going to probably break the bell. They'll probably need to buy a new one.
Then you can bring the shards home.
I can bring the shards of the bell home. Exactly. But anyway, until next week, folks, take care of yourselves, please. I want to see you all back here next week. And for the lurkers up there in the lurker box, make sure you turn out the lights, clean up your mess.
Don't leave popcorn all over the floor.
Yeah, don't leave popcorn on the floor. And if you've left any food in the refrigerator up there in the lurker loft, take it with you, because I'm not cleaning out your dirty food anymore. It's just not happening.
You sure you don't want to? We shouldn't be growing mushrooms.
I'm positive.
I mean, he's allergic, but I love
him. Yeah, I can't do the mushroom thing because I'm allergic to them. She loves them. But strawberries, yeah, we could probably do strawberries. I actually like real strawberry. So yeah, unlike the artificial stuff, I can't stand it in anything. But we'll see you guys next week. Everybody have a blessed week. Take care of yourselves and each other. And good night. In stream. There we go.